What are we going to cover for today? We will cover our learning outcome for today. We'll state the requirement of gross income. The topic will be about the gross income definition together with applicable case law. So when you answer the question on gross income, you need to also add the case law to that answer, and you need to apply it in a practical situation. So other learning outcome is to determine whether natural person. So we are going to do gross income and resident. So you determine whether a natural person is the resident of the Republic because of being ordinary resident or because they comply with the physical presence test. So we'll do the physical presence test, and also we will also check whether the person, by being a resident, qualify to pay for gross income. And also the last one will determine and discuss why type of income do not meet the requirement, why certain type of income do not meet the requirement of general definition of gross income. So in detail, in a summary, we will do the definition of gross income and then apply it in a practical situation, and also test if the person is a resident. Remember, the resident also form part of the definition of gross income, and also determine why other income do not meet the requirement. So any question on the learning outcome? Okay, let's go to the detail. The background of gross income. So gross income is the main thing in taxation. It's the main building block of taxation. So gross income is the main thing, is the main topic in the gross in taxation. So amount to be must be included in the gross income before it's subject to tax. Before we can even say anything about tax liability, we need to know what amount qualify as a gross income in order to subject it to tax. So the framework in the textbook is the starting point of how to calculate the business and individual taxable income and tax liability. As I said, the gross income, before we can do anything, we must know what amount to be included in the gross income so that we can determine the business and individual taxable income and tax liability. So the general framework for calculating taxable income and tax liability start with the gross income. Everything in tax starts with the gross income. We want to know if that amount qualify as a gross income so that it can be subject to tax liability. And for business and individual, we must first establish if the business or individual is a resident or not. Also, gross income goes hand in hand with resident. If that person is a resident or not. If he's not a resident, he doesn't pay tax in South Africa. If he's a resident, he's liable for tax in South Africa. So let's go to the main thing, which is the definition of gross income. In Section 1 of Income Tax Act, we have a definition of income tax. So under the definition of income tax, according to Section 1, is saying that gross income, we need to know these 5 requirements of gross income must be present in the definition of gross income. These 5 requirements, they are very important. This person must be, the first one must be a resident. And then on, sorry about that. So it must be the gross income definition, as I said, there must be a present in the definition. These 5 requirements must be present in the definition of gross income. There must be a resident, and there must be a total amount, cash or otherwise, in the year and the period of assessment, received or accrued to the taxpayer, excluding receipt and accrual of capital nature. So the person must be a resident. The taxpayer must have the total amount in cash or otherwise in the year of assessment. The period is very, very important here. A period of assessment, it must be received or accrued to the taxpayer, and excluding the receipt and accrual of capital nature. All of these requirements must be met before income can be classified as a gross income. So these 5 requirements must be met before we can say this amount qualify as a gross income. So there are 2 parts of gross income. The first is that we will deal with the resident. So we'll deal with the resident. We'll explain the resident in detail. And the second part will deal with non-resident. And for resident, remember from first year, resident are taxed on worldwide income, and non-resident are taxed only on the income received from South African source. So for non-resident, the source is very, very important. Where does the money come from? Where does the income come from? And for the resident, the worldwide income is very important. Where does the money come from? And also the residency of the person. So let's talk about the resident of the Republic. We have this test to determine whether the person is a resident of the Republic or not. A person other than a natural person is a resident of the Republic if the entity is incorporated or established or formed in the Republic. If for a person other than a natural person is a resident, if this requirement must also be met. Incorporated, established, and formed in the Republic. The companies in the Republic and effectively managed in the Republic. These 2 tests must be met before we can say this person, other than a natural person, is a resident in the Republic. So to establish whether a natural person is a resident, these 2 tests are applied, namely. These 2 tests must be applied to establish if the natural person is a resident. So the ordinary resident test and the physical present test. We have these 2 tests, the ordinary resident test and the physical present test, only done if not ordinary resident in the Republic. So we have these 2 tests, a person other than a natural person. And the second one is whether a natural person is for a natural person. The second test, the first test is a person other than natural resident. So here we will be talking about the company if it's established or formed in the Republic and is effectively managed in the Republic. So here, the second one is the natural person, is individual. If he's a resident, he must pass this test of ordinary resident test and physical present test. So the person must be physically present to be regarded as a resident. Let's go to the definition of a resident. So in section 1 also of the income test, the first step is to determine whether a natural person is ordinary resident. If a natural person is an ordinary resident, then the rules applying to physical present are irrelevant. If you are an ordinary resident of South Africa, you don't have to apply this rule of physical present testing. The physical present testing are this rule that I was talking about. So if you are a natural person, there's no need to apply the rule. If you are not an ordinary resident, they may still be a resident because they met the physical present test. You are not a resident. The first scenario, you are ordinary resident, so we don't have to apply the rules of testing whether you are ordinary resident. The second, you are not an ordinary resident, so you need to meet this requirement of physical present test to make sure that you qualify as a resident. So ordinary resident is determined on the balance of probabilities as distinct, which factor will result in the different answers. So this test is very, very important to say is for company, we must know that we must test whether the company is incorporated, established, and formed in the Republic. And the second one, we must test if the company is managed in the Republic. And for natural person also, we must test the ordinary resident test and the physical present test. So as I said, for ordinary residents, we don't have to do. For a person who is not an ordinary resident of the Republic, we need to do the physical test. So as I said at the beginning, that we need to also apply the case law. There are two important cases. So you need to go through these two cases for resident, to test the resident if the person was a resident. So you need to go through these two cases to apply them in your answer. These cases are established the principle that a natural person is ordinary resident in the place where they return to from their wanderings. So these cases, if you go through them in details, you will see that these cases will establish the principle that a natural person is an ordinary resident. So the physical present test, a natural person who is not ordinary resident of the Republic may be a resident if he's physically present in the Republic for a certain period. So these two cases will determine whether a person is an ordinary resident even if the person is not physically present in the Republic in a certain period. So we can go through the first case. But this is just a summary. In the first case of Hogan versus CIR, the taxpayer was requested by the company. The taxpayer was requested by the company to go overseas to act as a company's buyer in a view of a difficulty of obtaining merchandise caused by the war, and he was accompanied by his family. So in this case, the company requested the taxpayer to go overseas and then to work as a company buyer. So this is very important to say he was requested by the company to go to overseas. And then he was also accompanied by his family. So when when you have a question, you must establish whether this person, what was the intention of the person to go overseas and who was accompanying this person. So the permit authorizing his departure contained in the word duration 9 months. So the duration of the person staying overseas was 9 months. Then he settled in the apartment in New York. Then he was granted an extension from 9 months. He was granted extension of 12 months in respect of the permit to remain in the America. From the date until 30 June 1942, he was there in 1941 and also 1942. So it was 9 months. He was outside the Republic 9 months plus 12 months. So from that date up until 30 June, neither the taxpayer nor his family returned to the Republic. So before we go to the question, to the answer, I want us to discuss this principle of saying the person was outside the Republic, was working overseas, and he was accompanied by his family, and he spent 9 months plus 12 months. So from that date until June neither the taxpayer nor his family return to the Republic. So does he qualify as a resident of the Republic, or he doesn't qualify? So can we discuss this concept? If he qualifies or not qualify as a resident, does he qualify as a resident, or does he does not qualify as a resident? Anyone who want to take it?
I think that the person will qualify as an ordinary resident due to the fact that it's not exceeding the period of 5 years, and that he is a South African resident as such and working there due to company sending him.
Thank you, Skyla. Maite?
Thank you, Stella. Okay, anyone who wants to take it? According to Stella, he's still a resident. He must pay tax in South Africa.
Over to you, Wilson.
All right. My thinking is that because he's ordinarily a resident of the Republic, the fact that he's overseas does not change, because you just indicated that as a resident, you are being taxed on a worldwide income. So be it you are in the UK, US, as long as you are ordinarily a resident of the Republic, you will be taxed.
Yes, I agree with you on that one. Wilson? Oh, it was Wilson.
Yes.
It was.
Okay, yes, I agree with you. He did pass the, remember when you answer this question, you must also check the physical, these two tests. So the first one was, now we are talking, this is other than a natural person, is a company, and this one is a natural person. So the ordinary resident test, yes, he qualified as an ordinary resident. He didn't change to be American resident. He's still an ordinary person, and the physical present test also he qualifies because he didn't change the residence. So he still qualifies as an ordinary resident. He still need to pay tax from worldwide. Anyone who wants to take it? Who wants to have further discussion on that? Okay, we can continue. We are still talking about the definition of a resident. In 1939, the taxpayer had leased a flat in Johannesburg for the period of 5 years and has furnished it. The flat has been sublet by with the furniture during the first one is that in 1939, the taxpayer has leased a flat in Johannesburg for the period of 5 years. The flat was leased for the period of 5 years. A flat has been sublet with the furniture during the period of which the taxpayer has been in America. So the taxpayer is not in South Africa, in America. He sublet the furniture during the period of which he was not in South Africa. So the court held that the question regarding ordinary residence, so we are testing ordinary resident. If the taxpayer is not in South Africa, he lists the flat that he was staying, and then the court held that the question regarding ordinary resident was not to be determined solely by his action. When we test if this person is still a resident or not, we cannot solely depend on this action of him leasing the flat and subleasing the flat subleasing the flat with the furniture. The action is to lease the flat and sublet with the furniture. So we cannot rely on this in his intention. Furthermore, that physical presence during the whole year of assessment was not decisive of the question of ordinary resident. The taxpayer was still found to be an ordinary resident. So it doesn't mean if your intention is to list the flat and go to America, go to outside South Africa, it doesn't mean that you are not a resident. You are still an ordinary resident. You'll be taxed on the worldwide receipt, and it was established based upon the country to which he will naturally, and as a matter of course of return of his wandering. So this person, this case is about a person who leased the flat and go to his action was to list the flat. So we can rely on his action of listing a flat and say this person is not a resident of South Africa. He is still an ordinary resident of South Africa. He still need to be taxed on the worldwide income.
Yes, I just want to understand. So what will be the difference between someone taking citizenship in America and he has a property in Johannesburg, like in this example? He's got this property in Johannesburg, but now he has taken citizenship in America. So he's no longer a resident. I understand the question about wandering, but now he has taken citizenship in another country.
He's no longer a resident. Remember, we said if he's no longer a resident, he will not be taxed in South Africa.
Okay.
So this person didn't change his citizenship. If the question, Wilson is saying, if we change this question to say the taxpayer, he's saving this, but he's saving this property, but he's no longer a citizen of South Africa. So he's not ordinary resident. We're still on the definition of the resident. It will be the usual or the principal resident, and this could be described as a real home for this person. So in this case of CIR, this case number 298, cattle and has immigrated from Republic to America. Now this person has immigrated. He's no longer in South Africa in July 1983. So before to migration, he has sold some of his assets and invested in proceeding Eskom stock. Eskom is still in South Africa. The company that he sold the asset. Remember, before he migrated, he sold his asset and invested. The company that he invested is still in South Africa. So he's no longer a resident. He went to America, but he still has some investment in South Africa. In addition to his investment, he held shares in the company that is owned private resident. In addition to this investment in Eskom in South Africa, he held shares in company that owned the private resident, which he lived while he was a resident in the Republic. So this resident was not let on his departure. It was kept vacant to provide him with accommodation when he returned to South Africa. So this person will come in South Africa, and then he will where the resident was not let, so they will also provide a resident to him when he returns to South Africa. So between 1983 and 1986, which is 3 years, he returned to the Republic. For 3 years, he was not in South Africa. So on 10 occasions, each of the period is less than 2 months. So he will return for less than 2 months. Two of this occasion, he attended director's meeting. He's working in South Africa. He attended a meeting. Then he stayed in all of 10 occasions. He stayed in the former private resident. So he attended the meeting in South Africa. He stayed in the former private resident. So also, he was there for 3 years and he returned again to attend the meeting, and he stayed in on his former private residence. Remember on the question we said they will provide him with accommodation when he returned to South Africa. his resident was not let. He didn't sell the accommodation or rent the accommodation. He kept it vacant. So the main purpose of his visit to the Republic were domestic matter, including the schooling of his children. He came to South Africa for attending the meeting, and then he stayed in a former private residence, and privately the purpose of this visit to South Africa was for schooling of his children, building private yacht, completing the yacht race in the Republic, attending his brother's funeral, supervision his various investment in the Republic. So before we even go to the answer, do you think he qualifies as a resident or he doesn't qualify as a resident? So are we taxing him in South Africa as a resident, or we are taxing him worldwide? Because this person, let me repeat it again, this person was in the Republic. In this case, had immigrated from the Republic from South Africa to America in 1983. So before he went to America, he sold his asset and then he invested in South African company, and then he held the shares owned by the private resident, which he lived while he was a resident of the Republic. And then remember, when he comes back to South Africa, we'll go to his accommodation because he didn't rent it. And then he came to South Africa for 3 years, between these years of assessment, 83 to 86, which is 3 years. He will return to South Africa on 10 occasions, each for less than 2 months. He will attend the directors' meeting. He will stay in his former residence. Remember, he didn't sell it. And the other private matters is the family matters of schooling his child, and then raise and go to the family funeral. So is this person are we taxing this person in South Africa, or are we taxing this person worldwide, or we don't tax this person at all?
I think this goes to the question I asked earlier, but the technicality here is it's saying he immigrated to America, right? But he has a property in the Republic, and he has family and children that are still attending schooling. So in terms of the ordinarily resident test, it says we will test him on the balance of probabilities. So when I look at it, the likelihood of him returning to the Republic is high, in that he still has investment, he still has a property which remains unoccupied. So meaning that we can suppose, or that he's got intention of returning to the Republic at any given moment, meaning that he is still wandering in the America. So when he come back from his wandering, he might come back to South Africa. So we'll have to tax him on worldwide tax. That is my view. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, we need to tax him. He still has family. He still has, as you said, he still has some investment. He didn't sell his house. Yes, we can test him worldwide. Anyone else who want to add on that? We're still on the definition of a resident. The commissioner, when assessing him for Republic, had not been granted in terms of section, has not granted him. So in terms of section 10(1)H, exemption of the interest and on Eskom, this was not granted. Section 10 exemption was not granted to him on this case. Remember, we're still on this case. So they didn't grant him section 10 exemption on the interest. Remember, he had invested in Eskom. So they didn't grant him this section 10(1)H exemption. And also 10 for his dividends. for interest and at Eskom, and the dividends that were paid him, that they were paying him at Eskom, they didn't grant him this. So the commissioner was in the opinion that he was both an ordinary resident, so he was carrying on business in the Republic. So as we said, he will be taxed worldwide. This is the answer of the first question, where we were asking if this person is a resident or not. So the conclusion was that he was not granted the exemption on the interest and at Eskom, and the dividends also. He was not given exemption, but he will be taxed worldwide because it was in the opinion that he's still an ordinary resident in the Republic, and then he's still carrying on trade and in the Republic. So he'll be taxed worldwide. So another case, let's go through this case again. The lower court named him, find that we are still on that one. We are still on the first one, remember? We are still checking if this person is a resident. So we said on the answer, we didn't give him exemption. And then the ordinary resident, he was still an ordinary resident of the Republic. He was carrying on business in the Republic. Eskom, he invested in Eskom, so he was still carrying a business in the Republic, which is Eskom. So furthermore, he was an ordinary in America, not in the. It was found that in this court, it was found that he was an ordinary resident of the America, not the Republic. So he spent 3 years there. So he was an ordinary resident in the America, not in the Republic. The mere fact that he was a director of company did not mean that his directorship constitute carrying of a trade. He was therefore. So is the argument between SARS. SARS is saying that they are not granting him this. And then remember we said he's a resident. So they are arguing that he was an ordinary resident of the Republic, and then the mere fact that he was a director did not mean the directorship constitute. The mere fact that he was having shares in Eskom, it didn't constitute him carrying a trade in the of a business. So he was therefore neither ordinary resident nor carrying a business in the Republic. This means that the exemption provision were not available to him. That's why he was not granted the Section 10 exemption. So according, the interest from Eskom stock and the dividends earned by him were exempt from normal tax in the Republic. Therefore, the commissioner appealed against the decision to the appeal division, but this is the commissioner's argument, but only the issue of the taxpayer being ordinary in the Republic, the only issue of the taxpayer is being ordinary resident. The appeal division agree with the judgment, say it was not this person, the taxpayer, was not an ordinary resident in the Republic. So the person is an ordinary resident where he was his usual or principal resident, that may be described as a real home. So he will be taxed on the worldwide. According to this argument, they appealed, but he will be taxed on worldwide. So we can go to physical present test. So in additional, any individual who meets the physical present test but outside South Africa for continuation period of 334 days, according to the Act, they're saying any individual who meets the physical present test but he's outside South Africa for continuous period of at least 334 days will not be regarded as a resident in terms of Section 1. He will not be regarded as a resident from the day on which that individual sees to be a physical present. So according to Section 1, an individual who meets the physical present test, so we'll have the physical present test to test whether this person is he was continuously outside South Africa for the period of 330 full days. So if this person is not in South Africa for this period of 330 full days, he will not be regarded as a resident from the day in which individual ceased to be the physical present. So the 330 full days are very important. If an individual is neither ordinary resident nor meet the requirement of physical presence, that individual will be regarded as non-resident for tax purposes. In this case, if the taxpayer was not an ordinary resident and also he doesn't meet the requirement of physical presence test, the requirement of physical presence is that the person must be outside South Africa for 330 full days. He won't be regarded as a taxpayer. This means that individual will be subject, if you are not a resident, it means that you will be subject to tax only to income that is sourced in South Africa, or the income that is in South Africa. You will be taxed on that. So for example, the interest earned from South African bank, rental income and from property in South Africa, and service rendered in South Africa. These services will be the source from South Africa and will be taxed on them. Is the rental income if your property is still in South Africa. If you are not a South African, you meet the 330 days of the 330 full days, you are not regarded as South Africa, you will also be taxed. You will be taxed only on the income that is sourced from South Africa. Those income that are sourced from South Africa, example of them is the rental income for the property which is still situated in South Africa, for services rendered in South Africa. And if the taxpayer, the individual, does not meet the first requirement of physical presence test, physical presence test, remember, is this period of 330 full days, then you don't need to go to the next requirement. So you don't need to go, if the person doesn't meet this 330, you don't need to go to the next requirement. So again, so we covered the resident, we defined the definition of a resident. So we'll go to the gross income. So do you have any question regarding the resident? Are you confident that you can answer any question on the resident? If you were in the question, you were asked if this person is a resident, we need to text him in South Africa or we need to text him in worldwide. I think the question will be like that. So let's go to the gross income, because we said at the beginning that we'll cover the gross income and the residents. So I said from the beginning that we will have this requirement, the definition of this requirement. We must identify the 5 requirements that must be present in the definition of gross income. Is the residence, we did talk about the resident as the first requirement, and now we are going to test the total amount cash or otherwise. And then the definition is the resident, total amount of cash or otherwise, year and period of assessment, received or accrued to a taxpayer, excluding receipt and accrual of capital nature. So now we covered the residency. We'll go to the total amount in cash or otherwise, the second requirement of gross income, which is the total amount in cash or otherwise. So we'll start with the case. In the case of CIR versus Butcher, Gross established the principle of how value is determined. Remember, it must be a total in cash or otherwise. Otherwise, we need to determine the value. Tax is assessed on all receipt or accrual having a money value. So it must have a money value. So if something has no value in money, it cannot be turned into money or exchanged for something else. It cannot fall in the definition of the gross income. So it must be amount of cash or otherwise. This otherwise is something that has no, if we determine that this otherwise is something that has no value in money or cannot be turned as money or exchanged for something else. So it doesn't fall into the definition of gross income. So another case, in the case of the litigant, the case where the court held that the term amount included not only money, but also the value of every form of the property of the taxpayer, and even the value of the property received must be included in the gross income. So the total amount cash, we don't have a problem there. All the cash must be included in the gross income. The otherwise, it must be, it must have value. If the otherwise doesn't have money or value, it won't be a gross income according to this case. So in the case of Lettenberg, the court held that the amount to be included not only money but also the value. If you can determine the value of every form of the property of the taxpayer, and even the value of any property received must be included in the gross income. So the value, if you can determine the value. So how do you answer the question like this? So it will be, how do you answer the question like this? So it will be the gross income, it must meet all the requirements. So now we are talking about this requirement of total amount in cash or otherwise. So if you are testing if the amount is cash or otherwise, you must also state these cases. So you must start with section 1 of the definition of gross income, and also bring these two cases to say that this, if the question does the person didn't receive the money, you can bring this to say if it's something that has no value in money. So you must ask yourself if this can be exchanged, can be turned into money or exchanged for something else. So if it cannot be changed for something else, you can call this section and say it won't be gross income because it won't be exchanged for something else. And if the value can be determined, you can quote this court case and say the value can be determined, so it will be a gross income. So any question before we move to the next requirement, total amount cash or otherwise? Do you have any question on this one? Let's go to the second requirement. It must be received or accrued. So received means that the taxpayer received the amount of his or her own benefit, and or on his or behalf, on her own behalf. So it must be his own benefit or on his behalf, the money that was received. Accrued means that the taxpayer has become entitled to the amount. So the taxpayer must be entitled to the amount. An amount is included in gross income at either the date of the receipt or the date of accrual. So whichever happened first. And you cannot be taxed twice on the amount. So accrual will take place only when the taxpayer become unconditionally entitled to the amount. So this means that if you receive 1,000, if you receive 10,000, only if it rains on the 4th of April, then amount will only be accrued to me, will be accrued and be included in the gross income on the 4th of April, only if it rains. So on this example, the taxpayer received the amount on the 4th of April, so it will be taxed on the, basically what it's saying that to be it will be included in the gross income on the 4th of April. If it doesn't rain, it doesn't not rain, the amount will not be included in the gross income. So on the receipt, the received or accrued to, we said that received means that the amount is for taxpayers' benefit or on behalf of taxpayers' benefit. So it's received. You need to have the money must be received by the taxpayer on his behalf for his own benefit. So accrued, we said the taxpayer must be entitled to the amount. So the amount to be included in the gross income is either the date of receipt or the date of accrual, whichever happened first. So it's either you take the money, you include the money at the date of the receipt or at the date of accrual. Whatever will happen first, it will be included. So in this scenario, the taxpayer received 10,000 on the 5th of April, then amount will only be accrued in the gross income on the 4th of April, on the same date. And if it doesn't rain, the amount will not be included in the gross income. So we go to the other requirement, which is the year or period of assessment. So in terms of section 1, we're still on the gross income, and amount is only income and subject to taxation in the relevant year if it has been received or accrued to the taxpayer during that year of assessment. So the year of assessment, you can check on section 1 on the definition of income tax. On the definition of year of assessment, we do have definition of year of assessment, and then also on the gross income, the amount will only be included in the gross income if it was received or accrued to the taxpayer during that year of assessment. So check out the definition of year of assessment in section 1 of the income tax definition of the year of assessment. Each year of assessment stands on its own. So remember, for individual year of assessment, it's the 28th February each year. So when a rate of tax or special provision change from one year to the next, it becomes important from the point of view for both the taxpayer and SARS to ensure that all amounts received are accrued during that particular year of assessment are included in that year of assessment. Very important. You need to know the definition of the year of assessment. So here we're talking about the amount which is due or accrued to the taxpayer. It must be received or accrued to a taxpayer during that year of assessment. So the taxpayer and SARS must ensure that all money received and accrued. Remember, in the definition of gross income, the amount must be received or accrued. So here we just want to meet this requirement of saying it must be during that year of assessment and included in that year of assessment. So the last requirement is that it must exclude receipt and accrual of capital nature. This is very, very important. It's the last requirement of gross income. Before we go to the last one, do you have any question on the amount received, accrued in the year of assessment? Before we go to the receipt and accrual of capital nature. Okay, let's continue. We'll have the capital nature, excluding receipt and accrual of capital nature. The capital nature of income is determined using two broad types of guidelines. Subjective test, we'll have the subjective test and the objective test. So the first test, which is the subjective, being the subjective test, refer to the intention of the taxpayer. So it must, remember, we are saying is excluding receipt or accrual of capital nature. If a receipt and accrual is of capital nature, it's not subject to tax. So the first test that we need to determine whether is this accrual or receipt is of capital nature. We must do the subjective test, refer to the intention of the taxpayer. What was the intention of the taxpayer when the taxpayer acquired the asset? What was the intention of the taxpayer when he acquired the asset? Did he want the asset to be of capital nature or of? If the receipt is of the capital nature, he must not pay tax on that. He's not taxed on that. The intention of the taxpayer is measured by looking at his or her action and reason as well as the fact of the case. So when we check the intention of the taxpayer, we must measure it by looking at the action of the taxpayer. This is the subjective test. The reason why he acquired that asset. What was the reason? What was the action? As well as the fact of the case, the fact of the case of why the taxpayer acquired the asset. And then we must also test the objective test. The objective can be used when the intention of the taxpayer is not clear. When the taxpayer buy an asset, but we are not sure if the taxpayer want to keep it as a capital nature or not. So if the first test, which is the subjective test, is not clear, we must use the objective test. Or SARS and the taxpayer differ regarding the nature of the income. So if the subjective is not clear, we must check the objective test. And the objective factor that can play a role in determining the capital nature of income. The capital nature of income could include the period in which the asset was held, or whether the taxpayer was involved in the similar transaction before. So when we check the objective, when we do the objective test, we must check the period, if the period with the period the taxpayer held the asset, or the taxpayer used the scheme of buying asset for the similar purpose. For what? The receipt and accrual will be income in nature. It's either is income in nature or capital in nature. So we have two tests. It's either is income in nature. Income in nature will be taxed, will be included in the gross income. And then if the asset was acquired for the other purpose, it will be capital in nature. But we need to test the purpose of acquiring the asset. So the receipt or accrual will be income in nature if the asset was acquired for the purpose of selling it at a profit. It will be capital. When we say a thing is the receipt and accrual is income in nature, that means the purpose was for selling at a profit and will be taxed on that. However, if the asset was acquired and held not for the purpose of the sale of profit, but to produce income from that asset, such manufacturing, rent, interest, dividend, then the proceed and disposal will be capital of nature, in nature. Let's say you have an asset and then you are not selling the asset, but you want to produce, you want to rent a house. You bought a house and then you don't want to resell it for profit to produce income, but you want to rent it out to produce income. Then the proceed of the disposal will be in capital nature. In capital nature means that is excluded from the receipt and accrual. So it's excluded from the definition of income gross income, you are not taxed on that if it's of capital in nature. If it's income in nature, you need to pay tax on that. If it's possible, for example, the capital in nature example, a house that is acquired to produce rental income. If it's sold, it will produce a capital receipt. It will be a capital in nature.
So I get confused. You mentioned capital in nature and capital income and income in nature. What are the difference? Because now I really get confused because it seems like they are two totally different things altogether.
Oh,
Capital
okay.
in nature, capital
And
income, and income in nature.
No, I said, let me start from the beginning. I said excluding receipt and accrual of capital in nature. So we are saying we have these two types of income. The first income will be income in nature. Accrual will be income in nature. The second one will be capital in nature. So receipt income in nature, it will be where the asset is acquired, is the first one, where the asset, the purpose. Remember, we said when we test capital in nature, we test the purpose. The intention of the taxpayer was to acquire the asset for the purpose of selling it at a profit. This is income in nature. Then we have the second one, which is the capital in nature. The intention of the taxpayer was not for the purpose of resale, but to produce income. The example is where the house was acquired to produce rental income. The first one, income in nature, is where the asset, the house was acquired for selling it at a profit. So the intention of the taxpayer is very important here. The first one of income in nature, the intention, the purpose of the taxpayer was to sell the house at a profit. The second one, the capital in nature, the intention of the taxpayer was to produce rental income. So is capital in nature, is capital receipt. Here is income receipt.
Okay, thank you.
If it's possible that a taxpayer could have acquired the asset for investment capital, but later, remember I said for this purpose of testing, excluding receipt and accrual in nature, the intention of the taxpayer is very, very important. Here, in this case, the taxpayer has acquired an asset for investment, which is capital in nature, but later the taxpayer changed the intention to embark on a scheme of profit making. He's no longer capital in nature. The intention is now changing to making profit. Remember, make purpose of selling at a profit is income in nature. In such case, receipt and accrual will be income in nature. You bought the asset, let's say the taxpayer, go to the example that I did for the house. Let's say the taxpayer buy the house. The intention of the taxpayer is clear. He wants to produce rental income. He's not selling the house. So later, the taxpayer said, no, I'm changing my intention. I don't want to produce rental income. I want to sell the house for income. So in such case, the receipt will be income in nature. The intention of the taxpayer has changed now. So we also have amounts that are deemed to be capital in nature. In terms of Section 9C of the income tax, where shares are held for the period of at least 3 years, these are deemed to be receipt of capital in nature. So it's where the asset is held for the period of at least 3 years, and the other one is where the amount received in respect of share sale will automatically be deemed to be capital in nature. Is two scenarios under Section 9C of the income tax. These are deemed to be capital in nature. They are not taxed remember the definition is saying excluding receipt of capital in nature. These are not included in the gross income. They will not be taxed. Is the shares that are held for the period of at least 3 years, and the amount received in respect of sale of share automatically will be deemed to be capital in nature.
I think I'm also not comfortable with this capital in nature or income in nature. So what I wanted to understand is if that in because it both you're gonna receive money either way, whether it's in income or as a profit. So if it's an income, it's still part of the profit because you are receiving money. Or how do you differentiate whether it's profit or it's a normal rent that you receive on a monthly basis?
Roberto, can you repeat it again? I think
Okay.
I was lost.
Okay. You say
We
the
have capital
first
in nature.
is
Yes.
we've
Income
got
in nature.
capital in nature and we've got income in nature. So on the capital in on the income in nature, that is if you are selling a house to get a profit. But if it's in income in nature, that's whereby now you're getting a rent on a monthly basis. So my question is, the profit or the rent that you receive, it's still profit. So
Roberto,
how do you?
hold it
Okay,
there. You said
okay.
capital in nature and income in nature. So the income in nature is when you have a house, you sell it for profit. And capital in nature is when you buy
So
the house, the intention is to produce rental income, and it will be capital receipt, it will be capital in nature. Then what, and the question is?
I want to understand that the profit and the income, isn't that the same thing because you are receiving something on it? So how does one know whether this is will be now income in nature or capital in nature? Because at the same time, whether it's a rent or it's a profit, you still receive something. Or maybe that's just I don't know.
No,
I just
yes,
need
yes.
clarity
I
there.
get your
Yes.
question. I get your question. You are saying if it's capital, is income in nature, you are still receiving a profit. If it's capital in nature, you are still receiving profit,
Correct.
both of them. So what I'm saying now, we have this section 1, which is definition of the gross income. The definition is saying we are excluding receipt and accrual of capital in nature. So we are excluding the receipt of producing of this house acquired to produce rental income. It doesn't mean it doesn't it doesn't qualify to be on the gross income, but later we'll do the on capital gain profit or on capital gain tax. We will include this, the capital gain. That's why we're saying is a capital gain, is capital in nature. So we will, the proceed of studying this will be attracting the capital gain tax. We are not saying
Okay.
the income, we are not taxing it at all, but for now, when we are talking about excluding receipt of capital in nature, we are not including it on the gross income. It doesn't qualify as a gross income, but it doesn't mean this income, when you sell this, when it produced income, if it's sold, it produced a capital receipt. The capital receipt will be taxed as capital gain on capital gain tax. But for now, when we are still talking about gross income, we must it qualify as receipt of accrual of capital in nature.
Okay, so the last part for the rental income, we can only consider that if we actually sold the whole house, not just getting the rent. If I understand what you just mentioned now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So let's do example. It will make more sense when we do example. So we are good in this one. They are deemed to be of capital in nature. So example, of capital in nature. We have David inherited money in 2019. He bought 2 residential units of 450 each with his inheritance. Remember, it's his inheritance. He had since received rental income. I said, if the intention of David is to receive rental income per month, which he has declared at SARS. He immigrated to London and decided to sell this unit. The unit was sold at 500,000 each to the tenant during 2014 year of assessment. Discuss with the relevant case law whether the 1 million that he received from these 2 duplexes, which is 500,000 times 2, it was 2 units, should be included in the gross income or not. So I will just give you until 20 past to read through this, and we'll go and discuss the answer. So the question, what is required from you is that you need to take this 1,000 and check if this amount, this 1 million, will be included in the gross income or not. Remember one thing about this question is that David, this money was inherited by him, and then he received rental. His intention is to rent these 2 houses, these 2 duplexes he bought. Then he received amount of 1,000 per month, and then he's also immigrated residency and decided to sell this unit. The year of assessment is 2014, and then discuss with the relevant case whether the 1 million received from this should be included in the gross income. So I'll give you until 16 past, 20 past will discuss this question. Just read through it and then let me know.
I was just reading the question, so I'm not sure because I see David inherited the money 2019, but we're talking about the 2014 year of assessment. So must we just forget about the years and just, I don't know. That's what I was asking. I thought maybe you're gonna respond so that I can be able to see if I can answer.
The
And if
unit
it
was
was an
sold
error.
during 2014 year of assessment. No, maybe I think this is not correct. Let's forget about the year which she sold. (2024) year of assessment, because he inherited the money in 2019. He bought 2 residential for 440 with he has since received the rental income per month, and he immigrated and decided to sell. The unit was sold to that year. It's 2024 year of assessment. Do you have answer for us, Lerato?
I will just think
The 1 million is
the 1 million that he got for because he sold, then it will be part of his
sold,
gross
yes.
income. Yes.
It must be included in the gross income. Is income in nature.
Income in nature, I think it's the one that it must be included. Whether it's income in nature or income in capital.
It's income in nature.
Yes.
Let's go back to this.
Can I perhaps give it a
Receipt and accrual of capital in nature. Let's go to this. The receipt and accrual will be income in nature if assets were acquired with the purpose of selling them at a profit. And then let's go to the second one. Is this asset acquired for the purpose of selling it at a profit?
No,
No,
so it's the other way
Okay.
around.
it's the other way
Let's go to
around.
the second one. If the asset was acquired and held not for the purpose of the sale of profit, but to produce income from the asset, such as rent. Disposal of assets will be capital in nature.
Yes.
For example, this person bought a house bought these 2 apartments to produce rental income. If he now selling it will produce a capital receipt. So let's go to the intention. Let's see the intention of the taxpayer. If possible, that a taxpayer could have, the taxpayer could have, if Mr. We said to Mr. If David, if possible, David could have acquired the houses for investment capital in nature, which is this one. He bought those apartments. He acquired for the purpose of renting them. If later he changed his intention to embark on scheme of profit making, such case the receipt and accrual will be income in nature. So Lerato, are you still saying is income in nature?
No, but the last part now that you just read, that
Mm.
one, it might be debatable because he might be moving because he want to get the money, or he might be moving because he just want to move permanently there. So if someone offered him the money that he might get R1 million for the 2 flats, he might move because he's gonna get the money, or his intention just to move abroad. So the last part, it's still, yeah.
Did he change his intention? The question is, did David change his intention? Firstly, we agreed that David, he inherited the money, and his intention was to use the asset to produce income. It was for rental, it was capital in nature. Then later he decided to move. We agreed that it's capital in nature because it was the asset that was acquired to produce income, to produce income by rental income. So later, David decided to sell this unit. And then the intention was to move to London. He wants to sell it to move to London. Did he change his intention? Did David change his intention? Wilson is on hold. Before we go to the solution, let's stretch our brain. Did he change his intention? Lerato, you want to answer?
No, not on the question. It does not indicate that he changed his intentions.
Okay. Let's see the solution. Suggested solution. So the first thing when you answer, you must provide the gross income definition. Remember, it's very important, even though it talks about the capital in nature. So you must provide the gross income definition and briefly refer to the relevance of each requirement. So did he receive the money? By saying that, you must say in terms of section 1 of the income tax, amount, if you test it, you will say the amount was received cash, the resident, he's a resident, the amount was received, this is the amount, this is the 450, it was in cash. Let's see the definition of income tax. So when you answer this kind of question, you must first go to the definition of income tax and test if each requirement has been met before you can say that this is gross income. So David is a resident. You agree with me? He's a resident. He's still a resident. And then the total amount he received 450. He received 1 million. The total amount was received cash. Then in the year of assessment, yes, it was in the year of assessment. Then you can say a resident. You can talk about him being a resident. He's a resident because he's still in he's a South African resident. The total amount, yes, 1 million was received in cash. And the period of assessment, yes, it was received in 2024 period of assessment. It was received by him. It was received, David received the amount. It was received by him. Then the main problem is excluding receipt of capital and receipt of accrual and capital in nature. So you see, before we even go to the problem that we want to solve is this. The question was, is these two duplexes 1,000 that 1 million that he received of two duplexes should be included in the gross income? Yes, we did test all the requirements except the last one. We are not clear about the capital in nature. So we need we did provide the gross income definition, and then we need to identify the crux of the problem. What is the problem? Is capital versus revenue? Is capital versus capital in nature versus income in nature? So you can start by talking about the problem. You can say the problem in identify is capital versus revenue, capital or revenue versus revenue, or income. But I prefer it revenue, capital in nature or revenue in nature. It's still the same thing, income in nature. So in this case, officer's case, you must refer to the correct applicable case. So there's a tree and fruit principle that was introduced. The fruit is the revenue in nature. The tree is the capital in nature. The fruit is the rental. The rental that was received is the fruit, and the tree is we have the tree and the fruit. This is the rental income of 10,000 per month is the fruit. The capital is the 450 that he inherited and buy these two residential duplex. Is the capital, is the fruit, is the tree. So from the tree, which is the two residential, we find the fruit. The fruit is the rental income. So the fruit is revenue in nature, and the tree is capital in nature. The tree is capital in nature. The two residential is capital in nature, and the fruit, which is the rental income, is revenue in nature. So the duplex are the trees. The duplex is the trees. He bought two duplex. From the tree, he get the fruit, which is the rental income. So another case, in the Stoffel case, the test of the intention. I kept on asking, did the taxpayer change the intention? So we are testing the intention of the taxpayer was applied, and the question to be asked is whether the taxpayer was busy in the scheme of the intention of the taxpayer. The intention of David was with the scheme of profit making or mainly realizing his capital asset to the best advantage. So we are testing if he did change the intention. So suggested solution, I said, we start with the definition of the gross income. We test if all the requirements are met. But on this David issue, we found that the problem was capital versus revenue in nature. So we applied the visceral case where we were talking about the tree and the fruit principle. The fruit being the revenue in nature and the tree being capital in nature. That means the duplex are the tree, which is capital in nature, and rental income is the fruit, which is income in nature or revenue in nature. So we did bring another court case to test the intention of the taxpayer. So the question that need to be asked, whether David was busy. Is David busy with the scheme of profit making, or David is just moving to another country and mainly realizing his capital asset to the best advantage? So let's go on. So in another case, which is Natal estate case, was asked whether David, the taxpayer, had crossed the Rubicon and gone into the profit of making. Did David change his intention? So this case talks about the intention of David. The fact of each case must be considered in such inquiry. It's important to include the intention of David, both when he acquiring and selling the asset. History of the transaction. We don't have history, it's just David, but he had inheritance and bought asset. Continuity, method of finance, own fund or borrowed fund. David inherited money. The extent of marketing owner's activity prior to selling the asset, reason for receipt of utilization of the proceed. David bought the duplex with the intention of keeping it as investment and rent it out. So this case is testing the intention. If David had the intention was in capital and then change it to revenue, or the intention was revenue in nature and change it to capital in nature. So if David's intention was changed, let's see if it was changed. So the holding period, the holding period was 7 years, and the fact that he bought it with the surplus, with the inheritance money, are objective evidence of his intention. So according to this case law, he didn't cross Rubicon. He didn't cross the Rubicon and gone into scheme of profit making. Remember, he sold this asset because he's immigrating. The intention, he didn't say, his intention was to immigrate to another country. So he will not be able to look at this property. He will not follow the intensive, he didn't follow the intensive marketing strategy. He sold it to the current tenant. So he only wants to realize his capital asset to the best advantage. So the conclusion is that the amount are of capital nature and do not form part of the gross income. So David, amount that he received, he didn't change his intention. So the amount that he received from the sale, it doesn't form part of the gross income, is capital in nature. He will not be taxed on this or on gross income. He will be taxed on capital gain tax. Any question?
I think when we do the example, it kind of explain it much better. Yeah, but his intention, I still feel that he could have, okay, maybe he is selling because he's migrating, or he is selling because he's going to receive the 1 million. So that part, I'm not sure. I just want to find that when we are asked in the exam, will they give us the full scenario too, so that we know exactly whether what was his intention, or must we come up with all what you wrote here on the suggested solution? Must we follow all the steps in order for us to get whether it's in capital nature or income nature?
I think, Lerato, the best way to get marks is to first explain the gross income, the gross income definition, And then after discussing it, we saw that all the requirements are met, but the problem was capital versus revenue in nature, which is income in nature. So according to this question, they wanted us to discuss they wanted us to have a applicable to refer to the correct applicable case law. So we have 3 case laws that you need to mention. You will be also be directed by marks. For this one, maybe is 15 marks because you need to explain three court cases, the intention. Remember, I was talking about the intention of the taxpayer. What was the intention of the taxpayer? So again, they talked about the fruit and fruit and tree principles. So you'll be directed by the question to say, no, the question is talking about the property that was bought. That means there is a tree. And they're talking about rental. That means there's a fruit. And this case will be applicable. And also, they also want to, you need to also introduce the second case of intention. So there will be marks for fruit to discuss the case about tree and fruit, and the intention, also the Scott case, which was talking about the profit-making scheme, if this person is really making profit scheme. So also the Natal case is talking about the changing of the intention. We see that there is the intention, but is this intention changed? So if you see this, you need to mention the intention, the testing of here they just testing the intention. So you also need to have the conclusion. You see, this is about maybe 10 to 15 marks. So you need to elaborate more and also add court cases to substantiate your answer. So I'm not sure, did I answer you?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, it's a long question, yeah.
It is a long, and
Mm.
I just wish on the exam, or maybe in the exam or in the assessment, they can be the question can be specific so that you know which route you take. Because now here we just came up three rules or 3 laws that we have to apply here in order for us to get the solution. So you can imagine that when you are writing an exam, you are stressed. Now you think you're gonna maybe suggest 1 or 2 before you make your conclusions, and then you're not gonna get enough marks. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's tricky in that way that you need to mention all the cases, but the marks will also guide you if you need to elaborate more. But this kind of a question of capital and receipt in nature need a lot of explanation because we want to test the intention. We want to test if the taxpayer changed the intention. The intention is very, very important here. We want to add the court case to say this is the intention of the taxpayer.
I wanted to ask if the question includes something like he was offered like money. Like if he wasn't meaning to sell or whatever, but he was offered more money for the property and decided to sell. I always get confused with that, and I've noticed they like to give us that scenario and stuff.
Where the scenario where the taxpayer
is offered money initially when they bought, the intention was not to sell the property, but they are offered like more money, and then they change their mind and sell because of the offer. Like, what would be the treatment of it?
If David, let's say David was offered money, but
Money
he
for
was not immigrating to America. Someone just come with a better offer.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I think we'll test the intention. If the intention will then be changed from capital to revenue. That means he's in the scheme of making profit. The intention, remember we said the intention of David was to move. He can't keep the property because he's moving to another country. Now someone come and offer him the better offer, and then the intention, that means the intention it changed from capital to revenue in nature. So he'll be taxed. It will be included in the gross income. He's no longer capital in nature, is revenue. Remember, David will no longer be moving. David will still be a resident of South Africa, but he's selling the asset. His intention is profit-making scheme. It's no longer moving to another country. So it will be, if we test that the intention is profit-making scheme, will be taxed. The amount will be included in the gross income.
Now I'm confused all over again. Because
You're
if
confused?
yeah, because if you're saying if he's moving, he's selling because of he's moving. There's also an option of him not selling and also move. So that's where I get confused with he's selling, like his initial reason is because he doesn't want to keep the property. A person can still keep the property while living abroad, right?
Yes.
So that's why I get confused on the.
What is the taxpayer, what is David's intention then? Let's look at the intention. Remember, the intention is very, very important to test. We said we want to test if the intention, what is the intention of him? He's selling because he wants to make profit, or he's selling because he's selling it because of certain circumstance.
That's where the scenario is not clear, because now if we say circumstances, that's where I'm coming from and getting confused, because I on the I don't see any circumstances. He could still go to he could still relocate and still keep the property and still receive that rental income. That's where I get confused on. It's like for me, I don't see any circumstances that actually pushes him to actually sell the property, like he doesn't have a choice.
No, the question is saying he sold this asset because he was immigrating. He will not be able to look after the asset. You said the other way around. If we are saying he's not selling the asset, he only immigrate to other country, but he's not selling the asset. Are you saying that? I lost her.
I think she's. Oh.
I'm still here. Sorry, I'm struggling a bit with network. Yeah,
Okay.
like I just have to say.
David now he's immigrating, but he's not selling the asset. Are you saying that?
Yeah, like
There will be
okay.
no 1 million. If he's not selling the asset, there will be no 1 million.
So there'll just be
Remember
treatment of.
We are talking about the 1 million. If it's included, it's part of gross income. If he's not selling, there will not be a 1 million. There will be the rental income, the 10,000 that he's receiving every month. And remember, the asset, he's immigrating. The asset is in South Africa. He's taxed on the worldwide, on the 10,000 rental income. There will be no 1 million because he's not selling.
Okay.
You are not happy. Tell me where you are confused.
No, it's just that like the capital nature or part of the gross income always confuses me. So I think I need to revisit and read properly and understand. It's the part that I get confused the most. Yeah.
You just need to apply the cases for you to understand. If you can apply these 3 cases and say what the intention of the person selling, the intention, did he change the intention? If you can just differentiate that, if the person is keeping the asset, is selling the asset, what was the intention of the person buying the asset at the beginning? It was a profit-making scheme. Did he change from profit-making scheme? Those things, you must test those things. Any
Okay,
other
so
questions?
the intention, I look at it at the beginning when they are buying, what is the intention? And then I
Yes.
also look at the intention when they are selling. That's where I'll get
Yes.
my conclusion of what,
Yes.
like I need to get both the intentions when they bought the asset and both the intention. Then it will determine whether it's gonna fall to the normal gross income or it's gonna be taxed on capital nature.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
If you
okay.
can get that, if you can say David bought this for rental, for this property for rental, did he change the intention? No, he didn't change he's not in the profit-making scheme. Maybe if he bought 2, he bought 5 or 10, is a profit-making scheme, and then he held it for a year and then sold all of them at the same time. No, it's profit-making scheme. Now he held the asset for 7 years and then sold it later. And the intention of selling it, he was moving. This person, David, didn't change anything. But if you can grasp that thing of saying, did the intention change? And if you want to test the intention, you go to this case of saying, did he cross the Rubicon, gone from scheme of making into scheme of profit making? Did he sell the asset? What was the intention of him selling the asset? He was immigrating. No one was going to look after the house. Did he sell? Did he follow the intensive market? He sold it to the current tenant. He didn't go to advertise the property. It's
Oh,
not
okay.
into
I
profit-making
understand now.
scheme. Yeah. Any question
I
before
get
we
it
wrap
now.
up?
Thank you.
Yes, okay, David's question was about intention, but putting intention aside, isn't inheritance not supposed to be included in gross income?
Included.
Not included.
It's included.
The inheritance.
Yes, yes. Remember, is cash or otherwise it was received by David.
Yes.
Yes, it's included in the gross income. If we are talking about, we are not talking about the profit, the 1 million. We only
Yes.
talk about the inheritance. Yes,
Yes.
it's included. It's
Okay.
accrued to him. It's cash,
Oh,
and
okay.
he's a resident, and
Okay.
is of revenue in nature.
All right. Thank you.